What if I told you that 11 isn't just a fictional character, but the echo of a real experiment? That before Stranger Things, before the Demogorgon, before the Upside Down, there were already scientists, laboratories, and intelligence agencies trying to do exactly the same thing. To enter the human mind and rewrite it. No interdimensional monsters, no real psychic powers, but something much more unsettling. People. Flesh and blood people, so stick around because what you're about to hear today isn't science fiction, it's history. History. Dark history, and it really happened. Welcome to Beyond DNA, the channel where biology, history, and fiction intersect at the most uncomfortable point possible. I'm Claudia, and today we're diving into one of the murkiest chapters of the 20th century, the real experiments behind Stranger Things. And if you like these kinds of stories, where real science mixes with what we think is just fiction, stick around and subscribe, because this channel is for you. When B611 was locked up in a lab with wires, sensory tests, and adults treating her like an object, that didn't just come out of nowhere. The creators of Stranger Things were inspired by a real CIA program called Project MKUltra, a project that wasn't trying to open portals to other worlds, but something much more real and much more unsettling, to control the human mind. Not in theory, not in lab rats, but in real people. And to understand just how far this was possible and where the limits were, we have to start with the basics, with your brain, mine, and everyone else's. Your brain isn't some abstract entity, nor a mysterious black box. It's a real physical organ. It weighs about 3 pounds and works thanks to chemistry and electricity. It doesn't think in thin air. It doesn't store memories like files floating around. It works because millions of neurons communicate with each other through electrical impulses and chemical substances called neurotransmitters. Every memory you have, every emotion you feel, every decision you make, from falling in love to crossing the street, is the result of a very specific combination of signals. Neurons communicate with each other through a process called synapse. One neuron releases neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, GABA, and the next one receives it, interprets the message, and decides whether to pass it on or not. It's not a direct order, it's more like a constant negotiation. That uninterrupted dialogue is what allows you to think, feel, learn. And it's also what makes you vulnerable. Because if you alter that chemical balance, if you change the intensity, the timing, or the duration of those signals, you're not just changing a random thought, you're changing the mind itself. And in the middle of the Cold War, that sounded like pure gold. Quick context. The 1950s. The United States and the Soviet Union are obsessed with one idea. What if the enemy can brainwash us? It wasn't just military fear, it was psychological fear. There were rumors of captured soldiers who came back different, of prisoners who confessed to absurd things, of people who seemed to have lost their will. People talked about secret psychological techniques, hypnosis, drugs, methods capable of breaking the human mind from within. Many of those stories were exaggerated. Some were outright false. But in a world divided into 2 blocks where no one wanted to be left behind, paranoia did the rest. The CIA decided it couldn't afford to fall behind, so they launched MKUltra. The main goal was to investigate methods to change human behavior. The real objective was much broader and much more dangerous. Erasing identities, implanting ideas, breaking wills. And how did they plan to do it? With biology, of course. One of the star tools was LSD. In the 1950s, it wasn't a recreational drug. For scientists, it was an almost magical compound. No one fully understood it, but they knew it had a profound effect on the mind. LSD acts mainly on serotonin receptors, especially the 5-HT2A receptor. That causes a massive disruption in how neurons communicate with each other. Brain networks that are usually separate start to blend together. The sense of self begins to fade. Time gets distorted. Reality stops being reliable. From a neurobiological perspective, the brain enters a state of chaotic hyperconnectivity. And the CIA thought, if we can trigger this, maybe we can reprogram someone. The problem was, no one knew how to control the outcome. MKUltra gave LSD to soldiers, prisoners, psychiatric patients, civilians, many times without their consent. People who had no idea they were part of an experiment. Some suffered permanent psychotic breaks. Others developed chronic anxiety, paranoia, deep depression. In many cases, those after effects didn't go away when the experiment ended. There were people who never trusted their own minds again, who stopped seeing their memories as something reliable. Biology tells us why this happens. When you force the brain into extreme states for a long time, the neural networks that regulate emotion and memory can become permanently misaligned. It's not just a bad trip, it's a real reorganization of how the brain works. In some subjects, the line between what was real and what was imagined never fully closed again. And this is a neurological wound, because the brain isn't a chalkboard you can just erase and write on again. It's a living system, and every brain responds differently. When you break it, it doesn't always put itself back together, but LSD wasn't the only one. The project also explored sensory deprivation, and this is where Stranger Things starts to feel a little too real. Your brain needs stimulation, sound, light, touch. When you take those away, it doesn't shut down, it makes them up in sensory isolation chambers with no light. No sound either. The brain enters an extreme state. External information input decreases and internal activity increases. Hallucinations begin. Your sense of your own body gets distorted. You lose track of time, and little by little, you lose your sense of self. Neurobiologically, this happens because the sensory areas of the brain aren't receiving normal signals, so they start generating spontaneous activity. It's the same principle behind why we dream. In MKUltra, this technique was used to try to break down the subject's identity. The idea was simple and terrifying. If you disorient a person enough, they become more suggestible. And now tell me you're not picturing 11 floating in the tank with her eyes covered, cut off from the world. But there's more. They also experimented with hypnosis, electroshock, sedatives, stimulants, and unpredictable chemical combinations. Not with a clear protocol, not ethically, but through trial and error. From a biological perspective, we now know that many of these techniques affect key regions of the brain. The hippocampus, where memories are consolidated. The amygdala, which regulates fear and emotional responses. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for control, judgment, and decision-making. If you alter these areas, you can change how a person remembers, feels, or reacts, but not create superpowers. And here, it's important to draw a very clear line. Nothing MKUltra did could give telekinesis, real remote viewing, or psychic powers. That's fiction, but it could destroy a person from the inside. Stranger Things exaggerates, of course. It turns trauma into power, torture into abilities, biology into fantasy. In real life, the result was the opposite. Broken people, erased stories, after effects that lasted a lifetime. Many MKUltra documents were destroyed in the 1970s. What we know today is only a part, and that makes it even more unsettling because it proves something fundamental. Science isn't good or bad, it's powerful. Knowledge of the brain can be used to cure neurodegenerative diseases, or to treat mental disorders, to relieve suffering, or it can be used to control, manipulate, and harm. The difference isn't in the neurons, it's in human decisions. Missing science gives us monsters, parallel dimensions, kids with powers. Reality gave us something more uncomfortable. Adults who believed the end justified any means. And maybe that's why the show works so well, because beneath the horror, there's a very real biological and social truth. The fear of losing control over our own mind. Today we know much more about the brain than we did in the 1950s. We have neuroimaging, genetics, deep brain stimulation, and precisely because of that, the question remains urgent. It's not can we do it, it's should we do it. Because the line between research and abuse is never biological. It's ethical. And now I'm throwing the question to you. If there were a technology capable of altering memories or emotions, would you use it to heal? Or would someone use it to control? Let me know in the comments, because this topic deserves a debate. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've just survived the darkest biology lesson history has ever given us. And if you enjoyed this journey to the darker side of biology, Because here, we don't just learn how life works, we learn what we do with that power. See you in the next video with species that disappeared thousands of years ago. Ancient Guianae. And a question that sounds like science fiction, but isn't. What if extinction wasn't the end? This is Beyond DNA. And today, you've looked into the darkest side of the human mind.